Have you ever looked at someone speaking English confidently and thought, I wish I could speak like that? Many people believe that fluent English is a gift. They think it belongs only to those who studied in expensive schools, lived abroad, or have exceptional talent. But what if I told you that the secret of speaking English confidently is much simpler than most people imagine? The truth is that language is not built with thousands of complicated words. It is built with a small group of words that people use every single day. In fact, a large portion of everyday conversations comes from the most common English words. These are the words you hear repeatedly in movies, books, classrooms, workplaces, and daily interactions. Think about your own life. Every great achievement starts with something small. A building begins with a single brick. A journey begins with a single step. A book begins with a single word. In the same way, English fluency begins with common words. Words are small, almost invisible, yet they carry a power that can build worlds or break them. We often underestimate them because they do not have weight, they do not have shape, and we cannot hold them in our hands. But every thought you have, every dream you carry, every emotion you feel finds its voice through words. And when those words are used with intention, they become bridges between silence and understanding. Think about a simple moment in your life when someone said something kind to you. Maybe it stayed in your memory longer than any physical gift you received. Or think about a moment when a single harsh word broke your confidence. Even if it was said in seconds, it stayed for years. This is the hidden strength of language. It does not need time to create impact. It only needs meaning. The 1,000 most common English words are not just vocabulary items. They are the foundation of communication used by millions of people every single day across the world. These words appear in conversations, in messages in books, in movies, and even in the thoughts we try to express but cannot fully form yet. When you learn these words, you are not just memorizing language, you are unlocking access to human connection, to opportunities, and to confidence that was once hidden inside hesitation. You begin to notice that English is not as complicated as it once felt, because complexity disappears when familiarity increases. Many learners believe that fluency comes from learning rare or advanced vocabulary, but in reality, fluency comes from repetition, from daily use, and from mastering what is already most used in real communication. A child does not learn language through complicated grammar rules, but through listening, repeating, and using the same simple words again and again until they become natural. In the same way, when you focus on the most common words, you start building a mental environment where English is no longer foreign, but familiar and accessible. Every word you learn becomes a tool, and every tool you own gives you more control over your expression and your ability to be understood. You may not realize it immediately, but even a small set of words can help you describe your feelings, ask questions, and participate in conversations that once felt impossible. The power of words is not in their complexity, but in their usage, and usage comes from practice, not from perfection. When you stop fearing mistakes and start focusing on communication, your learning becomes faster, lighter, and more natural. Every conversation becomes a classroom, every interaction becomes practice, and every mistake becomes a step toward improvement. The most common English words are like keys, and each key opens a small door in the vast world of expression, understanding, and connection. When you collect these keys, you slowly unlock confidence that was already inside you, but waiting for the right language to release it. And as you continue learning, you begin to realize that speaking is not about perfection. It is about being understood and understanding others in return. Words can travel across distance, across cultures, and across differences, bringing people closer even when they have never met before. That is why focusing on the most common words is not a shortcut. It is a strategy that aligns your learning with real-life communication patterns. It is not about how many difficult words you know, but how effectively you can use the simple ones to express deeper thoughts. Because simplicity is not weakness, simplicity is clarity, and clarity is the highest form of understanding between people. When your vocabulary is rooted in the most common English words, you begin to see improvement in listening, speaking, reading, and thinking, because your mind starts recognizing patterns faster and responding without hesitation. And this transformation slowly builds a sense of confidence that grows with every conversation you engage in, shaping the way you express yourself in everyday situations and allowing you to participate more freely in discussions that once felt out of reach. Especially when you start realizing that when you begin to understand language, you don't just learn how to speak. You begin to understand how confidence is built from something that once felt impossible. Most people think confidence comes before speaking, but in reality, confidence is born during speaking, shaped through every attempt, every pause, every correction, and every moment you decide not to give up even when your words feel incomplete. The 1,000 most common English words become the stepping stones of this journey, not because they are powerful individually, but because they are powerful together, forming the structure of real communication that people use every day without even thinking about it. Confidence in speaking English is not about sounding perfect. It is about sounding clear enough to be understood. And clarity comes from familiarity with words that are used repeatedly in real-life situations. When you focus on common words, you are not limiting yourself. You are actually expanding your ability to express yourself in practical ways that matter in conversations, interviews, classrooms, workplaces, and even casual talks with strangers. Every common word you learn removes a small barrier between your thoughts and your voice. And slowly those barriers begin to disappear until you find yourself speaking without constantly translating every sentence in your mind. There is a hidden truth in learning any language. And that truth is that fluency is not a destination, it is a habit built over time. You do not suddenly become fluent one day. You grow into fluency through repetition, exposure, and courage to use what you already know, even when it feels incomplete. The most common English words give you that foundation because they are present everywhere. And the more you see them, the more your brain starts recognizing patterns instead of memorizing isolated meanings. This recognition is what creates natural flow in speaking. Where sentences begin to form without overthinking, many learners struggle not because English is difficult, but because they try to climb too high before securing the ground beneath them. They chase advanced vocabulary, complex grammar structures, and rare expressions, thinking it will make them sound intelligent. But true intelligence in communication lies in simplicity used effectively. When you can express your thoughts using simple words, you are actually showing mastery because you are prioritizing understanding over impression. And understanding is what connects people, not complexity, every time you use a common English word in conversation. You strengthen your mental connection with the language. It is similar to building muscle, where repetition creates strength. At first, you may hesitate, You may pause, you may search for words that feel just out of reach. But with time, those pauses become shorter. Those hesitations become lighter, and those searches become unnecessary because the words begin to live in your memory naturally. This is the stage where learning transforms into ability, and ability transforms into confidence. Confidence also grows when fear starts to fade. And fear fades when you realize that mistakes are not failures but signals of progress. Every incorrect sentence teaches you something new. Every mispronounced word helps you adjust. And every awkward conversation becomes a lesson that shapes your future communication. The people who speak fluently today are not the ones who never made mistakes. They are the ones who made mistakes repeatedly until those mistakes stopped repeating themselves. The beauty of focusing on the most common English words is that they are always around you. You hear them in movies, you read them in messages, you see them in books, and you use them in everyday thinking without even noticing. This constant exposure turns learning into something natural instead of forced. It becomes part of your environment, part of your routine, part of your identity as a learner who is slowly transforming into a speaker who can express thoughts without fear or hesitation. And as this transformation continues, something subtle begins to change in the way you carry yourself in conversations. You start to listen more actively, respond more naturally, and engage more confidently, not because you suddenly know everything, but because you finally trust what you already know and allow yourself to speak even when sentences are still forming, even when grammar is not perfect, even when the mind is still learning to keep up with the tongue, even when communication feels like a process that is still unfolding and becoming and growing and shaping itself in real time, and fluency is often misunderstood as a destination. But in reality, it is a continuous movement, a rhythm of speaking, listening, adjusting, and evolving with every interaction you experience in your daily life. People believe that once they reach a certain level of vocabulary, they will suddenly become fluent. But language does not work like a fixed achievement. It works like a living process that grows with use, not with storage of information. The 1,000 most common English words play a powerful role in this journey because they are not theoretical words hidden in books. They are practical tools that shape almost every conversation you hear in real life. From the simplest greetings to the most meaningful exchanges between people who are trying to understand each other across different situations and emotions. When you rely on common words, you begin to realize that communication becomes less about perfection and more about connection. Because the goal of speaking is not to impress others with complex expressions, but to share your thoughts in a way that another person can understand without effort. In everyday life, people rarely use difficult vocabulary. Instead, they depend on simple and repeated words that carry meaning through context, tone, and intention. This means that fluency is not hidden in advanced grammar rules. It is hidden in the ability to use simple words confidently and consistently, even when you are unsure about structure or pronunciation, because confidence builds clarity, and clarity builds understanding between speaker and listener. Many learners underestimate the power of repetition. Yet repetition is the foundation of mastery in any skill, especially language. When you encounter the same words again and again in different situations, your brain begins to recognize them automatically without conscious effort, and this recognition slowly transforms into natural response. At first, you may translate in your mind, searching for meaning before speaking, But over time, that process becomes faster until it disappears completely. And you start thinking directly in the language itself. This transformation is not sudden, it is gradual, built through consistent exposure to the same set of words that appear in conversations, media, reading materials, and everyday communication, shaping your ability to respond without hesitation. The real beauty of focusing on commonly used English words is that they reduce the mental pressure that often blocks learners from speaking freely. When your vocabulary is limited but familiar, your mind feels safer using it, and that sense of safety encourages you to speak more often, even if your sentences are not perfect. Over time, this practice creates a feedback loop where speaking improves listening, listening improves understanding, and understanding improves speaking again. You begin to notice patterns in how sentences are formed, how ideas are connected, and how meaning is carried through simple structures that are repeated across countless conversations in everyday life situations where communication matters more than correctness. Fluency also grows when fear starts to lose its control over expression. And fear loses its control when you realize that communication is not a test, but a process of sharing thoughts that do not need to be flawless to be valuable. Every time you speak using the words you already know, you strengthen your ability to think in real time, to respond without overthinking, and to trust your natural flow of speech, even when mistakes occur. This trust is what gradually replaces hesitation with movement, silence with expression, and doubt with participation in conversations that once felt using these words. In daily conversations, your speech becomes more natural and flowing, and you are in real time is not the same thing you become when you allow yourself the words you utter something to forward have and let and get English, often seen as a learning any voice of yourself a mountain that is too high to one and ten when is too high words when they were to go there valuable looking to be totally going what's the when but in reality, it is more like a path made of small, repeated steps that slowly shape your ability to communicate without fear or hesitation. The idea of mastering 1,000 most common English words is not about limiting your knowledge, but about building a strong foundation that supports everything you will ever say, write, or understand in real conversations. These words are not random vocabulary items. They are the heartbeat of everyday communication, used in almost every sentence spoken by native and non-native speakers alike across the world, forming the invisible structure of language that connects people regardless of background or education level. When you start focusing on these common words, something begins to change in the way you see language. It stops feeling like a complex system of rules and exceptions and starts feeling like a living tool that you can actually use in your daily life. You begin to notice that most conversations do not rely on rare or complicated words, but on simple expressions repeated in different contexts. This realization removes a lot of pressure from learners because it shifts the focus from perfection to participation, from memorization to usage, from fear to practice. And as you practice more, you begin to develop a natural flow that comes not from studying harder, but from engaging more. Every word you learn becomes a part of your thinking process. At first, you may translate everything in your mind, searching for the right structure before speaking, but gradually those common words start becoming automatic responses stored in your memory. This automatic recognition is what creates fluency, not the ability to know many difficult words, but the ability to use familiar words quickly and confidently without hesitation. The more you expose yourself to these words through reading, listening, and speaking, the more your mind begins to adapt to them until they feel like second nature. There is also a powerful psychological change that happens when you master the most common words. You begin to lose the fear of speaking because you realize that communication does not require perfection. It requires clarity, intention, and courage to express what you already know. Mistakes become less frightening because they are no longer seen as failures, but as part of the learning process that helps you refine your understanding of how language works in real situations. This shift in mindset is what separates learners who stay stuck from those who move forward, because progress in language is not only about knowledge, it is about attitude toward learning itself. As you continue using common words in real conversations, your confidence begins to grow in a natural way. You stop overthinking every sentence and start focusing on the message you want to share. This change is important because fluency is not about speaking fast or using complex vocabulary. It is about expressing ideas clearly without unnecessary mental barriers. The simplicity of common words allows your thoughts to flow more freely, making it easier to respond in conversations without long pauses or confusion. Slowly, speaking becomes less of a task and more of a natural response to interaction. In daily life, you begin to see how powerful these simple words actually are. They appear in conversations with friends, in instructions at work, in messages on your phone, in movies, and in every form of communication around you. This constant exposure reinforces your learning without extra effort, turning your environment into a language classroom where every interaction becomes a chance to improve. Over time, this repetition builds familiarity, and familiarity builds comfort, and comfort builds confidence that stays with you in every speaking situation. And as this comfort continues to grow and you start expressing these simple yet powerful words that form the foundation everywhere you go and in every situation, whether it is speaking with friends or participating in discussions or sharing your thoughts in everyday life, you language your web, but something you will let you from more well with you